what it is and doing what it does at times. We're punting. We're making
We
lemonade
called an
out.
audible today.
That's right. That's right. So, welcome to the Social Security Disability webinar on behalf of Stanley Law Offices. I'm Angela Moonan. I'm here with SSD attorney Shannon Doan. Shannon, what are we talking about today?
Well, first, I would like to apologize for the fact that my computer apparently wanted to keep the 4th of July celebration going and give us some fireworks this morning. We got those fireworks put out, and here we are.
Here we are.
What we're going to talk about today is how not all medical records are created equally, and things that people can do to help set their medical records apart or build them in terms of quality, because quantity is not all that counts with medical records. So just some tips on ways to strengthen the medical records in your disability case.
And it's interesting, Shannon, because in the personal injury business, for example, we talk a great deal about medical records, certainly in workers' comp, and
Mhm.
how vital they are to your case. I guess I never really took like the perspective that I always took it from make sure your medical records are accurate, which obviously that's one thing that
Mhm.
strengthens them, but really being mindful and intentional, and that there are ways to actually shear up those records beyond just necessarily accuracy. That's pretty cool. Like I never looked at.
Correct. One of the biggest bridges that we need to build in a disability case is connecting the subjective with the objective. So the subjective is what the individual is telling Social Security is wrong with them, how their conditions are affecting them and preventing them from working. Unfortunately, just telling Social Security you're unable to work isn't going to be enough to support a disability claim. Social Security is going to want to see a connection with what you're saying. They want to see that connected with objective evidence in your medical records. So that's hopefully some of the tips we're going to give today can help people achieve that goal and make sure that they're doing the best they can to document the record for themselves.
Okay. All right. So I've got your slides, Shannon,
Mhm.
and what we're going to do is I'm going to share my screen. It might take a sec to get the perfect thing up here, but I think I've got it lined up pretty well. There we go. Okay.
There, your computer is being much more cooperative than mine has been this morning.
Okay, so we've introduced that. So we're going to go right into tip number one.
Tip number one, it is incredibly important, whether it's a disability case or as you mentioned earlier, personal injury or workers' compensation, to seek regular and ongoing treatment. This is something Mr. Stanley mentions quite frequently in our staff meetings. We should be communicating with our clients to make sure that they're doing just this. So, in terms of seeking regular and ongoing treatment, this includes both with your primary care doctor and the appropriate specialists for your conditions. Primary care doctors are incredibly important members of our care teams, but Social Security is also going to be looking for types of specialist treatments. And we've touched on this in some prior webinars as well. For example, if you're alleging disability in part due to depression or anxiety, there should be some corresponding formal mental health treatment, psychiatrist, therapist, counseling, to show that you are truly pursuing the treatment, hopefully to manage those symptoms. Being prescribed medication just through a primary care provider is going to leave a gap in the medical record when Social Security is reviewing your allegations of depression or anxiety. Some clients have asked, what does regular mean? Should I be going to the doctor once a month? Should I be going to the doctor once every 3 months? There's not a number
That's just
value.
kind of, yeah, because it's just that is subjective, right? What
That
does
that and a lot of it depends on what your doctors, and this will be another tip we get to in a little bit, what your doctors are recommending. Um, but it's going to be concerning if Social Security is evaluating your case, and you're only touching base with the doctor every 6 to 9 months. It sort of raises a red flag about how serious can this condition be if you're going several months at a time without seeing a doctor. So
Yeah.
there's not a magic number. It's going to vary from condition to condition. Some conditions lend themselves to more frequent checkups. For example, diabetes. Doctors are going to be wanting to keep an eye on what your blood sugar, what your regular blood glucose readings are, and your A1C levels. And in not getting those checked for several months at a time, sort of raises a
Raises
question.
the red flag, right?
It does.
Right.
So again, seek regular and ongoing treatment. I had a hearing last week where the judge um, focused on, and this client was doing everything that her primary care provider was asking her to do or telling her to do, but the primary care doctor wasn't making referrals to specialists, despite the fact that the client was being very diligent in saying, I'm not getting any better. So if you're just treating with the primary care, um, also be mindful of the importance of advocating for yourself. If it's, for example, I injured my shoulder, the therapy that you prescribed hasn't helped. That anti-inflammatory isn't getting me any relief. Advocate for yourself. Ask for a referral to a specialist,
Right.
to get someone who is more nuanced in the particulars of your problem. Um,
Yeah.
you know, Number one, we hope that it helps improve your condition, but number two, it also shows again Social Security. You're doing the best that you can to improve your situation and being your own advocate. Um, Another tip in terms of seeking regular and ongoing treatment, just going to the doctor isn't always enough. You want to be communicating very clearly with your doctors about what your symptoms are and how they are impacting your functioning. I cannot tell you the number of times that I review files and I see medical records where the it's called the HPI section, the history of presenting illness, where a doctor is noting patient doing well or doing okay with no current complaints or no complaints. And that's not always accurate as to
Right.
what the
Just because I didn't specify the XYZ, they make the assumption that everything is okay.
correct,
So you've got to be very clear on what you're feeling and very open and
correct,
transparent about that.
correct. And sometimes I have clients
Don't
who
be a
say,
hero. In other words, don't be the hero where, oh, no, I'm fine. No, you're not fine.
and that is exactly what I was going to say. Some clients say, I don't want to be that person who's complaining all the time, or
Right.
I don't want to seem like I'm whining.
Right.
And it is in no way, shape, or form that. It is, again, you are advocating yourself. Your doctors can't treat you if they don't know what's going on with you.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so you know, don't just dismiss their "How are you today?" with I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right.
Okay, because they're going to say they're doing okay.
Yep.
Patient
You know,
stated they're doing okay.
and if you are doing okay that day, by all means say so. But don't just, like you said, be the hero.
Right.
There's not a prize for suffering through your conditions.
Yes.
Um,
It can work against you, obviously, in getting the benefits that you
correct,
deserve for having worked and paid into the system for however many years you.
correct. Um, Another tip in terms of communicating clearly with your providers. I've seen this far too many times in my 23 years of doing this. Clients will say to their doctor, I cut my grass yesterday, or I took my children to the park, or I took my grandchildren to the park. And that may be, but they then don't follow up with how that affected them.
Right. Then
Um,
I had to go, as soon as I got home, I had to ice, I had to take pain meds, and I had to go to bed early.
and exactly that, it's if you're going to make that comment of talking about things you're doing, that's fine, but communicate clearly with your providers about how it affected you. If it's I went to my family reunion on Saturday, um, and then I had to rest and recover for 2 days before I could start working on my laundry because my hip pain flared up, or because I was just exhausted,
Right.
or I had to go renew my driver's license and had to stand in line for however long. When I got home, I had to elevate my feet for a couple of hours because of the swelling. Be sure you're telling the whole picture, not just making a statement about what you did without letting them know how it's affecting you, because that can be used against you. I've seen far too many decisions from judges that cite, you know, this person testified as to all of these limitations, but here are multiple references in the record to all of these activities.
Right.
Um, Again, without telling the full story of how they actually affected you. Which let's kind of segue now into tip number 2, which is following treatment recommendations. Um, this is another thing that can really undermine the strength of your medical records. Um, you know, and by following treatment recommendations, take your medications as prescribed. Um, you know, it's frustrating to see medical records saying, yeah, I ran out of my blood pressure medication a couple of months ago and I never got it refilled. Or I'm out of insulin, or you prescribed this medicine and I decided I'm just not going to take it. You know, those are things again that can be pinpointed in a decision as the basis for denying you.
Right.
If medications are prescribed, they're being prescribed for a reason. It's important to take them as they're prescribed. Now, if you are experiencing side effects that make that medication not the best option for you, talk to your doctors. Document that in your treatment notes. Say, I'm doing my best. I'm taking this, for example, blood pressure medication as prescribed, but it makes me really lifeless, or I can't get any sleep at night because it makes me have to go to the bathroom all the time. Um, Other medications such as gabapentin, I very often see clients talking about the side effects. It makes me irritable, makes me edgy. Um, I cannot remember anything. I'm very foggy or unclear in my thinking, um, which is concerning. But don't just stop taking the medication without talking to your doctors about what the side effects are and how they're affecting you, and seeing what alternative medications can be prescribed. Because otherwise, that I'm just not taking gabapentin can be seen as you're not doing what the doctors think will help you. Um, Other times, doctors prescribe medications, and after you do the research about the side effects, you're not comfortable with it. And that can always be reasonable. But again, and this kind of ties to tip number one as well, communicate clearly with your doctor about your concerns. Just don't not do something. Talk with the doctors, work together as a team to find alternatives for you. Um, Another thing is, a lot of times, clients will tell doctors, no, I'm not monitoring my blood pressure at home, or I'm not checking my blood sugar. I might check it every couple of weeks. Some clients say they don't check it at all. Um, Aside from it undermines an allegation of disability, those types of things can really negatively affect your health. So if you have those types of chronic conditions, stay on top of them. Keep blood pressure logs, keep blood sugar logs, so that it can be shown that you're doing what you need to do, to again be your own advocate and watch out for your health. If you have conditions like migraines or headaches, other types of headaches, or seizures, um, it's hard to check those and as you would blood pressure or blood sugar, but keep a log. Keep a headache diary or a seizure diary where you're documenting the date, the time, any circumstances that might have triggered the incident, because that evidence can be helpful in showing how often you're having these issues. And medical records don't always capture those. So when you go in to see your doctor for that 1 month or 3 month or 6 month checkup, take those logs or diaries with you. Ask them to be added into your medical records so that there's documentation showing how these are affecting you. It's much easier to build a trail or create a trail as we're going through things, instead of 2 years now down the road when you have a hearing, trying to go back and remembering how many headaches you were having in a particular month. If you've got that diary, we have that evidence right there, and hopefully your doctor will have added it to your medical records. Couple of other recommendations to follow. Follow through with referrals if if your primary care doctor is sending you to a specialist, or if one specialist is sending you to another. It's important to follow through with those. The same thing with testing. It's sometimes very frustrating trying to build a case based on, for example, knee pain, and a doctor did an x-ray and it didn't show anything, but you continue to complain of knee pain, and the doctor orders an MRI, but you never follow through with it. We're kind of stuck then with that x-ray that doesn't show anything. So try to follow through with those referrals whenever it is possible. Again, it's the best thing for your health, But in terms of building a strong medical record, it closes the gap and eliminates that that bit of doubt that the decision maker can have oftentimes that gap can be cited as the basis for denying your claim.
It's interesting,
Um,
Shannon, because obviously we're talking about shearing up your likelihood of success in your in seeking benefits in your Social Security disability case. But really, in general, a lot of these principles, insights are great for any one of us in terms of when we're seeking care. Your level of communication, following through, checking the things that your doctor recommends you check for your own well-being, your own sake. I mean, yes, we're talking about SSD in the context of that today, but I do know I mentioned when I did the live earlier to tell folks that we weren't going to be live ultimately for the webinar, that I said, join in or share this with family members who, at times may have challenges with managing their own, being their own best advocate, et cetera, because this is good advocacy for anyone, right?
it is. At the end of the day, we have to advocate for ourselves. And, we are in the best position to take care of ourselves medically. So yeah, these while important to an SSD case are just sort of a bigger picture item as well. Which kind of leads us into tip number 3. Whenever it is possible, if a provider offers you the ability to access your records electronically, either through a patient portal or a MyChart, by all means, sign up for that access. This is important in a number of different ways. Number one, it allows instant access to you, to us, if you choose to share it with us as your disability representative, to download new and updated information as you're going through the disability process.
Mm-hmm.
Records aren't updated every time someone goes to the doctor. Unfortunately, the process just does not lend itself like that. Records aren't being requested every time someone goes to the doctor. So if you have portal or MyChart access, we can go in immediately, download whatever that office visit note or diagnostic test is, and get it to Social Security essentially in real time. It's each piece of evidence like that is like a piece of a puzzle. And the more pieces of that puzzle we connect, the easier it is for Social Security to see the big picture of what's going on. Another practical advantage of patient portal or MyChart access, it makes it easier for you to communicate with your doctors. You can send a message directly to them. Hey doc, I went to that family reunion on Saturday. Um, my hip pain is flaring up and it's just not going away. Then that way you're not having to wait until that 3-month checkup down the road where you may have forgotten about how miserable you were in the 3 days after that family reunion. So it again makes it easier to document how conditions sort of wax and wane, how often you're having flare ups, and again, just overall building a stronger timeline of the medical issues. Another practical advantage of having essentially instant access to your records is it's important after each visit. Log into your portal and see what the actual office visit note says for that visit.
Right, because it
Um,
gives you the opportunity to correct it if it's not accurate or
correct,
complete in some way. Yeah.
correct. If you know you saw your doctor yesterday and you spent time telling your doctor, how much your shoulder was hurting, or in mental health cases, talking to the doctor about how the exposure to all the fireworks over the holiday weekend triggered some panic attacks, or in cases with PTSD, caused some nightmares or caused some, traumatic recollections of what led to your PTSD diagnosis. But when you look into your my chart or your portal and you're not seeing any of that documented, it's easier to correct those mistakes in real time
When you can
than a
remember.
year
Yeah.
down the road.
You'll never, like you said, you'll never remember. You'll never recollect.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And particularly if you have multiple doctors that you're seeing for multiple conditions, it makes it easier to manage things in real time as we go than to try, like I said, a year or two down the road. Sometimes it takes to get to the hearing level, than trying to back up and correct or recreate a timeline. It
Right.
just is an obstacle that we can avoid.
Right.
And, a recent hearing that I did about a week and a half ago, um, the judge asked my client, and cited a particular office visit note and said, um, here is this note from Dr. So and so on a particular date. It says you had worked previously as a priest, and that you were currently working in whatever capacity. Um, and you could tell by the look of my client's face that that was in no way accurate. Um, and unfortunately, sometimes, computers, as we've seen today, can be our best friend or our worst enemy. And sometimes it's operator error, and people have a tendency to copy and paste a lot. And sometimes we're copying and pasting the wrong information into the wrong person's chart. Um, and, luckily it was very easy to explain this away. But if charts are regularly noting, client reports they're working, client reports they're babysitting their grandchildren. And it may be you told the doctor that once and they just keep copying and pasting into every note. But looking at your My Chart or your patient portal gives you again the opportunity to address that in real time instead of creating something for you to have to try to explain away a year or two down the road. Because at that point, it becomes, Social Security doesn't use the term credibility anymore, but it becomes a consistency issue. And, again, why create any room for doubt in a process that is already so difficult to be successful in? And then the last tip, we've kind of already talked about it. Reviewing your office notes in your patient portal or My Chart after each visit. Again, this is a way of advocating for yourself and solving problems before they actually become problem. It's better to be proactive than reactive in any circumstance, but particularly in documenting your medical records.
So Shannon, if someone wants to reach out about anything they've heard today, how can they do that, and what do you recommend as a next step? And why shouldn't they go it alone on an SSD case, especially if a denial has been issued, which in 2/3 of the cases happen?
Yeah, at the very first level, Social Security approves less than 40% of the people. At the second level of the process, they approve only about 15% of the people. Even after a hearing, the success rate is only about a 50-50 chance of success. Um, Going it alone does not improve those odds for you. Um, there's a lot to keep up with in terms of paperwork and deadlines. And it can be a very, very complicated process that a lot of people just simply aren't familiar with.
And
Um,
how are SSD attorneys compensated? So you win the case, which you have a high probability of winning cases. I see the online reviews for what you do, what you and your team do for clients. How are you ultimately compensated when the case is won and the client is
Great
awarded?
question. So if anybody is seeing this and giving some thought to, I wonder if my particular situation would qualify, reach out and give us a call. It is absolutely free to reach out to us. It's not going to cost you anything. We will take some information. They will run your particular situation by me in what's called an intake for me to evaluate what's going on in your individual case to see what the likelihood of success is. Again, that consultation does not cost anything. If we accept your case, you are not paying us anything through you're not going to have to pay us anything up front, first and foremost. A lot of people call and say, I just can't afford an attorney right now. That is the least of your worries. Social Security is what's called a contingency fee agreement,
Just like
meaning,
personal injury, just like everything
correct,
else, right?
correct, correct. You only will owe a fee if number one, we win your case, and number two, it results in back due benefits. Even if we win your case and there are no back due benefits, we're not asking for a fee. That is how the nature of that contingency fee works. Um, if
In,
you
in
do,
in cases, Shannon, like let's say out of every 10 cases that you do, in out of every 10, probability wise, and I know you're just guesstimating here, but on average, what would you say out of those 10 cases where back due benefits apply?
most.
Most of them. Okay.
There are particular cases that we know going in that there are probably not going to be back due benefits. For
And back
example,
benefits, to clarify, it's essentially like, look, you've been disabled considered as of this date, and anything from that date to this date, present
correct
time,
to the
that's
time they issue their decision.
yeah, gotcha.
But there are cases that we realize probably are not going to result in back due benefits. For example, those are the most frequent ones are called compassionate allowance cases, where by the nature of how severe and urgent the condition is, Social Security essentially bypasses the lengthy process that is typically a disability determination. Examples of those types of cases, um, ALS, or otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease, various metastatic cancers. Metastatic breast cancer is one of them. Um, Lewy body dementia is another one of those diagnoses that can qualify as a compassionate allowance case. And because those cases typically work their way through this process so quickly, they normally don't result in back due benefits. And in those cases, even when we're successful, there's not a fee. If you are successful and do have back due benefits, Social Security caps what the fee is. They set a fee structure that is, and the wording's a little wonky. That's about the best way to describe it. The lesser of 25% of the back due benefits or the statutory maximum, which is set in federal law. It's currently $9,200. And I try to give math examples, even though math is not my strong suit, to help people see because the wording is awkward. So in a case where the client has received $10,000 in back due benefits, the most that fee is going to be is $2,500.
So
It's
the
the
lesser of the
smaller,
25% or, okay,
correct. Um, Last week, one of our clients received back due benefits of around $83,000. In his particular case, the fees capped at 9,200, which is the statutory maximum, because 25% of that, roughly, about
right,
$21,000.
right.
So and that's the standard Social Security fee agreement. Whether
It doesn't
you
matter
talk
where you live and where, right, that's
correct,
federal law, right? Okay.
correct,
Which brings us to the last point, and that is that Shannon, all SSD hearings that you do, they're virtual. Your consultation with clients is virtual. So, and you can work with anybody from anywhere in the United States. Is that
correct.
correct?
That is correct. Technology has really allowed people to connect in ways that we could not do before.
Right.
So
So even the
wherever you
hearings
are,
themselves, et cetera, those are done all, I
yeah,
know in workers' comp, everything's done virtually. There isn't even an
yeah,
option anymore,
yeah,
right?
yeah. We can accommodate you with virtual hearings, either by phone or by video. We Everything can be done electronically from the comfort of your own home. Uh,
So 1-800-608-3333, as you see at the top of my screen, is the phone number. There's the website. You can reach out and send a note or questions, follow up to anything today at info@stanleylawoffices.com. It will make its way appropriately to Shannon. Shannon, I want to thank you, and I thank you for your patience on the technology issue today. You give that beautiful fur baby a hug and a kiss from us all, Mr.
yes,
Brutus.
he thinks he's the star of the show, and he doesn't think, he knows.
He knows.
Um,
And just let him
yes,
be, right? It's just easier
yes,
to let him be.
yes,
All
and
right.
every morning when I get up to come to work, he looks at me like, yes, you need to go to work because I have needs that need to be met. He knows that.
I love
Uh,
it.
I
Well, we
am
will
owned
do this
by a
again.
cat.
We will do this again. We always have help. You always have helpful, insightful resources and guidance. Again, if you take a look online at the reviews, many of the reviews for Stanley Law Offices come through Shannon's office as a result of Shannon's and her paralegals' diligence and commitment to not only clients, but to the process. So thank you again, Shannon. And I encourage all of you to go on to YouTube, look at some of the past webinars that Shannon's done and the subject matter that she's covered. And you can also find us, of course, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, on Instagram, all the platforms. We hope you like and subscribe and reach out again to Stanley Law at info@stanleylawoffices.com for a free consultation about yours or a loved one's SSD benefits and case. Thanks, Shannon. You be well, you and your husband.
Thank you. Thank you for being patient as I sorted my technology issues out. We got our adrenaline rush for the day.
Yes, we did. All right, you be well. Take care,
Thank
all.
you.
Bye-bye.